So that's always kind of a nice thing. So we're looking at,
But we pay for the recycled pipe is what it looks like, right?
pardon me?
But we pay to have it printed, the additional costs, the EDDM prep.
Oh, that's EDDM prep is just what Print Solution charges to put together all of the bulk mailing.
Oh.
That's a different cost. GDI actually kind of built that cost into our print.
Okay,
She pulls it out separately.
okay,
So that's kind of a new cost we're seeing.
okay.
But it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And she brings it directly to the individual post offices where GDI just dropped it off at St. Paul. We save a little bit of money by them dropping it off.
Mhm.
So that kind of brings down, because postage went up, kind of brings our cost down a little bit by doing it that way. So, like she said, anywhere where we can save a couple pennies here and there is kind of helpful. So yeah, Dakota Valley Recycling, that recycling guide, we get reimbursed for. So once a year, we'll get that money back, which is kind of nice. Our next issues will be February 15th. If you're okay with going forward, if you think it's useful, and I'm just sort of looking for your feedback, what you think of the first 5 issues.
Great. I think it's money well spent because I know it's getting to the household.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing. I try to pass it around my household to the various adults that are there. And so I think everyone appreciates the information that's in it. We know that it's getting to people. Unlike the second part of your presentation, I think it's the reach is, we know that all 32,000 households are getting the information, which is nice.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, from a policy making standpoint, what I appreciate is I think sometimes people think, well, franchise fees, for example, they're going to get a letter in the mail that's telling them about what's going to change. Well, the fact that we have a newsletter, we can point and say, yes, you did get notified, because normally we wouldn't do that for any type of policy change, right? So it's good that that kind of stuff is in there. We can say, yep, you got this in March or whatever. So from that standpoint,
Yeah, and I was just gonna echo, I think, you can never communicate too much. So I think with the amount of money we're investing in this, I think it's a wise investment. And I agree totally that when there are issues that come up, it's a great way to communicate that to every household and a great way to say and document what we did. I think we just continue it.
Yeah, no, and I thought the content was great. Visually appealing and just one of those things you grab when you get it in the mail. Two, I appreciate the using the local printer too, because it does look like that brought some. The list jumped quite a bit there though too. Is that just all new construction and new houses? The list just it's updated or?
Yeah, and it's a little tricky because some of the, as you know, we've got the different zip codes.
Yeah.
So Rebecca and I worked really closely on the mailing, the mail routes. And some of the mail routes are really goofy, to be honest. They go very deep into Farmington. So we had to kind of select which ones we were gonna, how far do we want to go in to the Farmington residents to share with Lakeville News. So you got to kind of make some cuts and some choices. So there's probably a little difference in that. And we get 125 that we keep here. And then I distribute those to all of our buildings. We put quite a few over at the art center because we have so many performances and so many classes over there. And those go pretty fast too.
Heritage too.
Yeah.
So do you have them addressed to each individual apartment then too?
Yeah.
So each of the apartment holders in a complex are getting it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad we're using the local printer too. That's good.
Yeah. It's nice to have somebody real close. So, and I was really impressed with the quality too. So.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to get a lot of feedback from QR code. I mean, I figured it'd be a word of mouth kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's good.
Okay.
Good.
Let's see if I can get to the
Oh, I
next.
do have one more question on it.
Oh,
Are you
sure.
finding it difficult for it to be timely? Meaning when you're only doing it once a quarter, the information that goes in there, are you finding it difficult to make sure for the gap that takes place?
No, but
As far as information
I
goes?
will tell you, we do work it really carefully. Like, we really think through, like, does this make sense? Is this something we could put on next door? So we have a lot of discussions. I'm trying to, make sure that I hit every department too. And, at the beginning, it was hard to get everybody involved. They just weren't used to that.
Right.
And then does this make sense? Is it gonna happen within these 3 months? Because everybody's real anxious to put everything in that first month. And we wanna make sure that it spreads through those other 2.
Right.
And so that's kind of a trick,
Okay.
so.
Thank you.
I was gonna ask this as part of this next piece, but, what is our access to email addresses to provide this to folks via email? If they wanted a digital version. I'm assuming we're not doing that right now.
We do, post this on our website as well. So if people wanted to sign up to get this electronically, they could. They could opt in to a constant contact email list, and they could get this electronically.
Just like any agenda.
Have we considered buying ads from ourselves from the liquor store? I was just looking back to see if we did, but.
Yeah.
To help buy down the cost of that conversation liquor committee's had.
You haven't.
I say put that on your agenda and see if it's worthwhile, just, we can defray a little bit of the cost from. I don't want to get into the business of selling ads to. But if we can buy ads from ourselves. Okay. Any other questions or comments about the newsletter?
Great. The next subject, Sun this week. So I've got, we bought 29 this year before we knew what was going to happen. And then I got a visit from Mike Elbert, our sales rep, just a couple weeks before they went to the new model. And he just popped in the lobby and let me know that they were going to go to the paid subscription. So I went back actually and looked up where we were at. 2016 was the year I started. So I have the numbers from when it was slid in the wood part underneath your mailboxes was 16,000, about 16,500. And then they went to the free subscription model. So to do that, they had to get mailing addresses, put it inside the mailbox. It went to 5,800. They worked up to 6,800. And now their first issue was August 16th. They are actually, I've been told it was 2,200. I just got the bids for legal ads, and it's actually 2,165. So I guess they were rounding a lot up. So yeah, it's actually 2,165. So apologize for the error. He contacted, there's been no change in the pricing. He contacted me about a week ago with a new offer. The new offer is 26 full page ads on page 2, which I guess is, I didn't know what he meant by 2,159. He considers that, they consider that a premium page. We are getting that for right now, it's $1,110. they want to give it to us for $100 less. And then give us 10 targeted email deployments at $600 each. I wasn't sure, I still am not totally clear how these targeted emails will work. This is not something I'm not terribly interested in, to be honest with you, because I'm very concerned about these 24,000 email addresses that they have. There's no demographic data on these 24,000 addresses, so I don't know how old these people are. Apparently, they're all within the zip code. He said they're can spam compliant, which is part of the federal government. You have to have a way to opt out. I think people get quite irritated by these emails. I'm very concerned about it. One thing I can say is that the chamber, the Visitors Bureau, Jean is going to pilot one of them. I think within the next few weeks. They are going to report back to me to say how it went, because there's supposed to be a reporting mechanism to say, how did it go? So she is going to try one of these email offers, and they're not, I don't know how to put that, very positive about it either, but they're willing to try one. Let's put it that way.
How can they say they have 24,000 emails when at the peak of their delivery, they only had 16,000 newspapers going out?
They have purchased these
Oh, okay.
through a marketing agency. And that's why I should have demographic data. I don't.
And so what happens is then, just because we spend money with them, they're the only ones that know the open rate. They're the ones that are gonna have all the data that goes behind those 24, which are gonna be duplicated for 2 people in the household, et cetera. And really, if I were them, I'd be looking at the angle of, then we get to say, and if you want a subscription, so they're gonna sell off the back of us, if that makes sense.
And that's kind of my issue, is I don't have information. They said they will provide a full report. I don't know what that report looks like. I don't know what kind of information we'll actually get back. It could be just, here's that open rate. We have the ability to, the other thing I'm not sure of is, he said they'll take information from our ad, or can we make our own email? He wasn't sure. That didn't give me a whole lot of confidence either. And I keep asking lots of questions, and he just says you just ask a lot of data questions. But I'm in marketing, I want data, so it's kind of important to me. So
I think they want us to save them. I'm just not willing to save them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Michelle, I'm torn because I think it's important that we help support local news. But I don't know how anybody can justify charging more with significantly less people seeing it.
And especially not knowing, I mean,
I mean, not even email, I mean,
yeah,
Paper
paper itself. But yeah.
Well, that 2,200 number, I mean, it kind of stagnant with that.
So,
I mean, 160. And I had a similar situation. I bought ads before they changed their model. Thought I was, having 6,800 subscribers and getting 2,200. So I think that was a little disingenuous, and it looks like that's kind of the business model at this stage.
I realize that, we'll put them in a world of hurt by not having our revenue, because I'm sure we're probably one of the top revenue generators for them. And however, they're a business, and they can pivot, and they can figure out if their model isn't working. Come back to us later when they get their subscribers back up, or they decide to sell their paper and somebody else decides to take over. I guess I'm just not interested in salvaging a company that has not really put out much news. And that's why they didn't get their subscribers, because people didn't feel it was worth the money. In this time, I realize it's tough on all these newspapers and they're all having to pivot and figure out a way to, get their monies, but I mean, I don't even know eventually when we talk about who's gonna be our official newspaper, if it's even worth it. I mean, who's seeing what's in there for our notices, et cetera. So anyway, me personally, guys, I'm sorry, but I looked at this and I thought, oh my gosh, they are gonna try to figure out a way to save themselves through us. And it's gonna cost us a mint, and we're mailing to people, spending that kind of money, and yet we know everybody's getting it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should still have an ad. I'm more comfortable with your idea of a year, just 12 issues once a month. And, see that. And I'd be curious to know, though, if they have some sort of plan or proposal that would include web ads. And I'd be curious to know what their web traffic is, that we could push people to city website through theirs, if there's any value in that.
Right. And I have been asking about that. Doesn't seem like they have a plan for that yet, so I can keep pursuing that. I asked you if they were gonna have a model for subscription for just the web, so that we could kind of pursue ads that way. And at that time, he said they were gonna bundle it together and not have separate, which I'm not sure it's a great
Doesn't
model.
if you don't have a subscription, you can't access their web?
No, I've been able to
Right.
get everything on the website.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that they had a message that came up that they wanted you to.
They did, but either I'm found a loophole or they just aren't enforcing.
So you just went ahead and pushed forward. Would it have stopped anybody else when they saw the message come up? Do you know what I mean?
I assumed it was going to be like a 2 articles a month kind of deal, and then like I press 2, 3, whatever. I just kept going.
Yeah, I don't think you can read the PDF version of the paper, but you can read the article.
Yeah, I mean, the website's pretty tough.
Yeah. I think, does anybody else think that going down to 12 is okay, or they want
I think phasing out is an appropriate exit strategy.
So just do quarterly.
But I mean, when you do the math, we're not paying any more per household. It's at 45 cents per household based on their subscription list. And so it's similar to our own newsletter. I mean,
What?
you divide,
You have 2,200 people and 1,000, it's costing $1,100 a week.
Yeah.
Or
so
$2,200 a month. So that's $100 per paid prescription, right? Or is that?
no, 1,100 divided by 2,200 is just under 50 cents a household.
2 times a month. Right, because you're doing it every other week.
I'm just talking about per district.
Oh, okay.
And you said the full page ad on the inside, that's not available anywhere online, right? Did we discuss that?
I mean,
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be.
So it's only if you can pull up the PDF of the,
right.
okay, I was just kind of looking, trying to see if,
And you can't pull up the PDF of the paper unless you have a subscription, right?
Right.
2 subscriptions, I still can't.
I think overall though, I think our biggest bang for our buck is our own newsletter. I'd like us, I think there are some other strategies too that I'd love to see us try to employ to get more people on the opt-in for getting it digitally. I don't know if there's a way for us to send out kind of a generic pin to anyone who currently opts into any agenda or newsletter to say, look at your other opt-in options, so we can get some cross promotion there. But based on this, I don't see us staying with the paper long term.
I kind of agree with the mayor that the ramping it down to once a month, framing it as kind of an exit strategy. I mean, because to me, the importance of having community journalism, if that's what we call it, is important. I mean, you talk to people in, what is it, Shakopee and all those
Yeah,
stations,
sure.
lost all of theirs. And I don't know if that product was better, but it's a huge void, I think. And again, it's not the taxpayer's job to prop it up, but I do think more of a ramp down strategy would be wiser.
I'm good with the one time a month. I just have a special spot for community newspapers. I realize that these things it's harder and harder to keep that business going. But I think, so I look here and I go, okay, if you do the 2 times a month that we're doing now, that's $28,000 on top of the $13,000 we're spending on our newsletter. Go to once a month, that's $13,000. So we're paying about equal. We aren't getting the same exposure. But I think to try that and you know, I would love to find a way to get some exposure with the online.
Right on, school district, I think does the same as us too. If
They quit.
they quit completely.
Yeah, the chamber is going to continue. They're going to do once a month and they'll take the first week.
Okay. All right, so I think, sounds like for 25, we'll do it once a month.
Or once a month.
Yep. Curious, there's some other options out there too.
Okay.
So
For their
can we
website.
buy our own email ones? I mean, you do it for other things, and businesses do it all the time. I mean, there's plenty of companies out there offering email lists.
We can also, we can make a concerted effort to publicize the email listserv a little bit more. We can talk to finance. Right?
Yeah, what are we allowed
I
to
don't
do
know if
legally with the utility
I don't know if we can put
customers?
something on utility bills or, I don't think we can just use the email. If they signed up for utility bills online, I don't think we can necessarily just use that, you know, as like marketing or anything like that. So, but we'll talk about other ways to.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, moving on to legislative priorities, Alan.
I think most of you are familiar with the process that we put together the legislative priorities each year. It's broken into 2 lists: primary priorities, which is focus on the most important issues that the city council wants to have review. And the second one is the additional legislative priorities, which is the list that we put together just in case one of those issues come up. It's important. Those are important to track throughout the year if it comes up at the legislative session. So, and then I can go through this, Mayor, if you want to, if you guys just want to start discussing it. But we did make some changes this year. We took out some older legislative priorities, some that had been addressed. And then in addition, the memo covers several additional legislative priorities that we wanted council to consider if they wanted to add them to the overall document. So that'll turn over to you, or I can go into more detail.
I don't know, what do you guys? Is there anything do you want a presentation, or is there something you want to focus on? I mean, I feel pretty good. I mean, there's a couple of things that I didn't see in here that I wanted to talk about. That's the social district, unless I missed it.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
It is?
Top priority.
Sorry, I went right by it. Yep. Okay.
I have 3 comments. On specific ones as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
One was for item C, elections. Could we include, we quantify how much money we spent on elections, so that's a quick reference point in this priority?
Are you talking the additional information now? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So, did you have more elections?
No, just,
Okay.
You mean include that in there, say the city spends X amount?
So, the regional council of mayors, we did have Steve Simon come 3 months ago, I think, to talk to us about this election stuff and get feedback. And one of the things that I said and some other mayors were that we would like to work with him, and ultimately as a legislative, do we really need 46 days? It's like a pretty hefty expense. And I'd be interested in adding something in here about having a conversation about the amount of days of early voting versus just a lot. You know, so we have to staff, 92 days of early voting in an election year?
How long has it been for, at 46 days? Has it been that way for a long time?
No, recent, within,
Yeah,
since 2020, I think.
maybe the 22 election maybe started.
And I think it might be the longest or tied for the longest in the country. It's fine, but I mean, so my point being is I think there's mayors that are going to talk to legislators about this year about at least maybe for the August primary to close that window and maybe leave the job open.
Oh, yeah, so if you're gonna put the pricing in, you should probably put both.
Yeah.
The primary pricing,
Right.
how much, and then, and maybe with some facts of
When they vote.
how many people actually,
Yeah, I think Ann told us, estimated here, like 50% of the early votes happen 10 days before.
yeah, I mean, just some little facts like that to be able to justify shortening the timeline.
Separate from that, the Dan Patrick computer rail item, I think, has been untouched for the last several iterations of this. But recently I was thinking that allowing the study of could allow us to look at alternative ways to use that line as opposed to, because we've talked about wanting to use that as a trail or other, could opening that specific element of it so that we're not, discounting any ways of using that line.
So I think they did lift the moratorium last session. So I'd rather not make any changes and then see what happens this year with the legislature. It was a Hanson bill to lift the moratorium. And so I don't want to be encouraging. Let's see what they do first before we. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just seems to.
I don't think our legislators would support you on that.
Yeah, that's also.
Well, I'm sure not. But if it leads to other uses, then I'm in favor of looking into it as opposed to just completely shutting it down.
I would say that the conversations we've had with like Progressive, for instance, and CP, they have buyer's remorse in doing anything that gives up their rail for anything that's not rail specific. And that having a conversation about trails is off the table for. And they were pretty, they basically said we screwed up in turning over our tracks for a trail. So they haven't, as a company, they have a moratorium.
Well, then the last thing that I just wanted to know is we have broadband high-speed internet here. And it just seems like we've closed the gap in that area. Is that even a needed item? I don't know if we have a number of how many homes are even left, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about homes. I know it came up at the finance committee last week, that there is an interest, especially in the business park, to continue to expand it. So there's some there was an opinion that maybe some businesses need some more access. So
Is that a broadband or is it fiber?
I think they just lumped high speed. I mean, yeah, I'd imagine it'd be fiber.
Broadband to me seems outdated. I think 25 megabits a second versus the 1,000 that we're at right now. So I don't know if, I don't
Do
know.
they
for
still
sure.
call it the border broadband grant or is it something else?
Have to check. We might.
I mean, I'd be fine with
We
moving.
we might change it to not be so specific.
Just high speed
Necessarily
internet.
grants, just say grants and funding in general.
Yeah, because I mean, if we had, in the future, if we had rural areas that I would have just tried to work some out stuff instead of putting fiber in the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, we can update that.
Those are my 3 points.
Got two. And this might be a broader discussion. The post office item to me, obviously it's very important. I completely agree with that. One of the things I don't think we ever talk about is, and I know Tierney kind of mentioned the zip code issue. I don't know if this is just a quagmire with the post office about getting the entire city on one zip code, or at least for cities, like their mailing address says Lakeville. So I don't know if there's something, the post office does those kinds of studies or anything. I know our priority of getting a new post office mail service that comes 2 or 3 times a week is actually a higher priority, but I just throw that out because it seems like, I tell you, going through a campaign, you do run into some people that don't really
Yeah.
realize they live in Lakeville.
So I recently went to a session on this.
Oh, you read the zip code?
Yeah, there's
So
a,
just take a resolution
there's
from
a
the council.
nationwide work group on this.
Oh.
You're not alone on this.
A nationwide work group?
A bunch of cities have the same issues.
Wow.
Where it's really profound is in some cities, especially like California, where your fire insurance is based on your zip code. And if you have no fire risk, that you're in that zip code, because part of it is, it's really impacts their fire insurance. So there is a process about getting it changed. At the end of the day, you have to get an act of Congress. They all get turned down. There's a process that you submit and they get turned down, and then you have to literally get it. So some cities have done it. I think the bigger issue for us is going to be, I'm sure we could get a bill introduced. I'm sure Angie or the senators would do that. I think the bigger issue is what that means for the delivery, because let's say it gets all changed to 55044.
That means it's all going to
It's all
Lakeville.
coming out of this, and I don't know if they have capacity to handle that as it currently is situated.
Because the post office zip code is the post office that's servicing that area.
That's what I understand.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it. Is that, Rosemont servicing the Rosemont one, and Farmington would service the Farmington one.
So is that based on zip, because I look at a city like Burnsville has a couple different zip codes, but they're all Burnsville addresses. Egan has 3 different zip codes, they're all Egan addresses. To me, that if we could just get one or the other, one zip code, or get the Farmington addresses that are in the city of Lakeville, and just say Lakeville, Minnesota 55024. Or,
We can add some language in
That
here.
works.
or work cities,
That's what I mean.
cities.
Okay, so I honestly don't know what happened a gazillion years ago when my parents, when we lived in Valley Park. But supposedly the citizens had to vote on switching the post office. So I don't know if that still comes into play, and they voted no. They did not want to change their driver's licenses, their credit card statements. While we make, we want to make it sound simple, so it's all us, it becomes a hassle for the resident to make that switch on, for the new legal address.
I don't even think the post office looks at anything but the zip. I don't think they care what the city says.
Well, the only other thing that they do, it was requested by Burnsville when I was taking bulk mail over to Burnsville. And they said, if you could please, so there's a coding that goes on the prepaid postage. And it was saying that it was coming out of our zip code, Lakeville. And they said, if you could please change that setting so that it says Burnsville, because they must get some sort of, I don't know if it's a kickback, I don't know what the right term is, but they wanted us to switch all our bulk mailing to make sure it said the zip code of Burnsville if we were gonna bring them over there. So there's all kinds of things that take place internally with the post office that I don't think we're aware of. And then just the other, I don't know if our citizens have to vote on having that switch. I don't know that it's just up to us to have a bill go through.
We could add some language to this, just to say,
Right.
including seeking clarity on consolidating zip code or
That's perfect.
or postal
Yeah.
address.
For this type of document, we don't really need to know what we want. We just have to have some
And we could
aspiration.
move them to, chip away at.
And I'd love for, and I'm not trying to say that I wouldn't love for it to all be Lakeville.
You just love that Rosemont zip code, don't you?
Yeah, I grew up with it,
I
but
told you about when Doug Anderson had remote office visits once, and we went to one of the mobile home parks, and a resident came up and said to Doug, "I've always wanted to meet the mayor of Farmington."
My second one, and I just want to go on the record on this issue and acknowledge that my day job, I work in the grocery store industry. I have concerns about that item B, specifically on the full-strength beer at grocery and convenience stores. I see the need in this document to have some language talking about protecting the city's monopoly, that sort of thing, general language. I think specifically calling out this policy proposal is problematic for that industry. And you know, our grocers are good corporate citizens. Go talk to a city like Farmington that doesn't have one, and you'll see the value of them. So I raised that. I know there was a little bit of discussion about it last time, but to me, that is a little strong and a little specific. But and I know I'm probably the minority.
no, I'm always, this is the one thing in this document that's always drove me nuts, so.
Can we reframe
I
it?
don't mind competing, I guess, but anyway.
Can we reframe it instead of, it being about opposition to expansion, but protection of our operations? Because we just have it's just the one paragraph, right?
Yeah,
So maybe something legal opposing legislation that would, I could come up with something, off the top of my head, but, you know, protecting our operations from,
it's the same thing then, I mean, you wouldn't let them expand, that's the only way. to
Well,
protect it.
I would concede that I just specifically, there's every year there's 20 different proposals that impact municipal liquor in some way. And we're just calling out the one, which I know is the one most likely to happen in the next few years, but. So I think something about protecting our right to, you know, sell the products that we have and the exclusivity or something like that.
So then it would be a local control issue. You know, so, you know, you would oppose any legislation that would take away our local control on the sale of wine and beer.
Well, I see that trade associations will probably not like that because the bill that would allow beer and wine in grocery stores would allow cities to maintain their exclusivity. That's not necessarily just our issue, though. It's like if convenience stores in Burnsville start selling beer too, that's going to impact Lakeville liquors. So both sides of the issue.
yeah, but I just don't feel it as much that it does if it's in another city.
Yeah.
I'm less concerned about if you could buy beer at Speedway in Burnsville or out in Burnsville. I mean, you can Target in Burnsville, just, walk in a different door. I mean, so it's like, at what point do you?
So we're keeping it in. I mean, I'm with Dan, I want to see it gone, but.
I don't know the last time we had a full discussion of this. Because I don't. But
It does impact us if we don't have it in there. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I mean. But it just makes us have to be as competitive as we can be. Plus, customer service, et cetera, we do really well at it and people like that. Do you know what I mean? They, you know, you shop where you're also more comfortable with the environment and the people that are servicing you, right?
Well, I remember we had this conversation about this specific language last time. It was asked of us because of the trade association, but we're no longer members of that trade association. So do we have to even comment about it at all in either direction?
Well,
You're never gonna get staff to be taking this out.
Yeah, I get it.
it's a significant impact on our
I mean, it would have a
operations.
significant impact on our operations if we were to, not if we took this out, but if the legislation were to change,
Mhm.
yeah, we'd compete, but you can't argue that it wouldn't hurt us.
No, I
can't.
yeah, but I think it's gonna happen or not happen whether we have it in our document or not. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a difference in, so if all of a sudden Cub Foods can have a section of shelves with beer on it, they're gonna be limited in what they can offer. It's much different than if all of a sudden Cub Foods goes, well, we're gonna start a liquor, we're gonna call it grocery. We're gonna have a whole, 4,000 square feet of our store is gonna be selling liquor.
How
Well, that's
about,
not the-
how about you put in a statement
But
that
that's what I'm
talks
saying.
about how much money we save the taxpayers by the revenue from the stores so that the legislature can come up with maybe a plan. I mean, I don't know what it would be. Maybe that means that anybody in our city, we could use a franchise fee against them to, sell their liquor in our city if the law passes. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
But give them something else to,
you would need 20 Amazons to replace
Well, and that's,
the city revenue we get from liquor store.
but that also kind of calls for broadening this out a little bit too. Any changes that happen to that, to the system, the state needs to be mindful of those communities that do municipal liquor, right, but from a revenue perspective too. So I mean, we don't have anything that says if you're gonna make any changes to municipal liquor abilities, that they're gonna backfill, revenue or something like that, we talked about those options in the past, but
I'm just less concerned about what happens outside of our boundaries because we had total wine and weather. So I wouldn't say I would want wine and beer in Lakeville Cup or whatever. So I think if we focus on allowing municipal cities to continue to have their operation exclusively.
well, I think that we have to give them something more to care about than just saying we oppose something. Tell them why we, what it means to us.
Yeah.
Type of thing. So a statement in there about, what we, even if it's even the last 10 years, I mean, I don't know how long this has been an issue with the legislature, but, even if it's talking about the long term of how it's helped the city, et cetera, so that if they decide to do this, 'cause they'll do whatever they want, maybe they can come up with some solutions to the revenue that gets lost from cities.
Yeah, I mean, what I share is that you could build Farmington and Rosemont's data centers and still not match how much revenue the city gets from our liquor operation.
and there's a strong case for that when you're, don't get any local government aid.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we're the ones that do it right.
We can add some language in there about what the benefit of our municipal liquor funds do and how much. I'll just add, we are the largest in the state and our policy does get noticed.
In a lot of, how long was this in here before Sunday liquor sales became?
Oh, it was in there every year I was here before that happened. But no, I take it back. By the time that passed, we went neutral, took a neutral position on that.
Because I would think one of the arguments would be, well, if we're putting grocery stores, you can get it when the company shows up on Sunday, then that's not even the point.
Mhm.
It's,
I mean, I don't want to start like drawing legislation, but if they were, if you got to the point where they said we'll replace your revenue with a, LGA with an accelerator every year, I mean, that would be an actual conversation to have.
What's the odds of that gonna happen?
Oh, I'm just saying, I mean,
Well, that's why I think that the statement about the money and how much it's helped us over the years is important for them to realize
yeah,
the
or maybe the thing is,
repercussions.
we wouldn't support any legislation unless there's some way to replicate that revenue or something.
Well, and my original point too, I mean, I'm not opposed to saying we oppose changes to our product availability. I'm opposed to calling out the specific grocery and convenience store. I mean, I know that's the most relevant proposal right now, but I think we're taking a whack at some of our corporate.
Oh, so just pulling out grocery and convenience stores and leaving the rest there?
That would, as I think also Michelle's comment about the, the revenue and preserving our ability to, maintain our, I don't know, maybe this is a larger discussion, sorry. I don't mean to pick up the issues here that are probably, don't be on legislative proposals.
who else is gonna do it if it's not the grocery?
So, right.
Nobody's gonna be able to open a liquor store here. So I mean, those are the only places that would be allowed to anyway. And it's kind of back to my previous point, that, yeah, liquor stores are different, but like a beer cave in a grocery store. I mean, nobody else can come and build a liquor provider in here.
You open the door to them though, probably to a legal challenge. If this were to pass and it was in the grocery and convenience stores, we lose the ability to say no in a
Well, I
lot
know.
of ways, so that a total line could open up in Lakeville because they'd have a way to, I don't know if sue's the right word, but to be able to say, at this point, you don't have a legal standing any longer for us to not
Except we
be.
can.
That's what
we can
that's-
limit the number of liquor licenses.
And that's not what I'm saying either. What I said
Oh,
is,
okay.
I don't know why you would take convenience and grocery stores out of there because there's nobody else that can do this anyway. And that's what the legislation is. I mean, if we're gonna want to have a strict conversation about the legislation, I think we need to mention the legislation that we want
Right.
to be in
Okay.
there. And I understand your point, Dan, but I don't know, if you take that out, it makes no sense. Because everybody knows it's
Well, that's what
grocery and convenience stores.
I mean, that's why you word it to protect, make it more that we support protecting our current, the current system. It needs to be much more general and positive, but
I don't,
we can table this. I
yeah.
think.
I don't support change.
I just really wanted to-
More thorough. Why, we would take that part out, because it's been in here for several years at this point, and previous councils have talked about why this is important to our operation. So I don't think based on this conversation, we should make a change quite yet.
But can't we add the wording on the revenue?
That's expanding rationale. I don't think that's changing the
Oh, okay.
policy position.
It sounds like we want to talk about this more. Do you guys, this isn't helpful for legislative session, but I think we probably should add this to our retreat agenda.
Should we add it to our retreat agenda or just wait or do it sometime after the session's over and talk about? I mean, I don't.
Well, we would add it on the list of topics to agree on to discuss next year.
Okay, all right.
I think
At some point during the year.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be a retreat, but some. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it needs more conversation than just legislative progress. Okay. Other changes?
So, couple questions.
Yep.
First of all, you'll see that the County Road 50 Interstate 35 is highlighted in yellow. That still just needs to be updated with some update numbers. Which we'll get to. The items that Alan identified in the memo, are you okay with just adding all of those into the additional priorities? Are there any of those that you want to put as a primary?
Actually, I kind of thought the cybersecurity was more of a primary, but that's just me. I think that's because I would hope that something we're seriously gonna tackle.
Considering my outlook was down all day today.
Yeah.
Yeah, yours too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is ours.
I think everything that is on there, I think should be added. I don't know.
You don't know if that should go into a priority? Not all of them go into a priority, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
The one,
what's kind of the message from LMC? Are they making that a top priority?
I would recommend they all go into the additional priorities. And
That's
I
fine.
mean, really keep a focus on those primary ones. I think that's important.
The only thing I would just say, because I just got texted that Representative Koznick will have the gavel for the transportation committee. So if there's any other transportation stuff we want to put in here.
Just on that, we are going to be at your December 9th work session, an update on 30-50 or 35 and 50. We will have to make some decisions that night. This gets us close on some design issues, so just transportation.
Yeah, I guess, do we have anything in here about the greenhouse gas transportation, how it should be a state instead of project specific? Because I think there was some conversation on LMC at one point about that, where, you know, every year the year's project should meet goals, but we shouldn't force one city.
We can find some space for that.
Yeah. Because that's a repeal or a change from legislation last year.
Transportation specific.
Yeah, and that's why we're rushing the 35-50 to avoid finding
We have to submit some plans by February 1st.
right. But so I'm on the, whatever, I'm the League of Cities representative on this transportation thing, and that is feedback that has come from out of that committee.
And then, so we'll add those. Do you want, I think the session starts January 15th, if I remember right. Do you want to invite our legislators to a work session in January? It'll be after the session starts, but not by that much.
Yeah, that's okay.
And we always invite county commissioners as well, Met Council, we'll invite federal delegations. Sometimes they send somebody or not.
Yeah, unless you think that the January meeting was good.
I don't think I'll be too busy.
Okay.
And then we can put this, we probably can't turn this around for next week's meeting, but we'll probably put it on the second meeting in December for approval.
Okay.
Great.
You could
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the 2024 year review and final budget. Tax levy discussion. You want to do that first? Or you want to do third quarter first?
Let's do the year
Year end.
end levy.
Okay.
That's the lengthier discussion.
Okay.
So, no, I'm good with that. So I'll just hit some high points that I outlined in the report. Fund balance ratio to next year's expenditures, we're looking better than we had budgeted for 2024. When we adopted the budget, we thought we'd come in at 48.6. We should come in at 51.6. And that's even with building permit revenues, but lower than what we had hoped. We're still holding out hope for that they may come in just at the budgeted amount, but it's pretty tight where we're at to date with those. Looking at, so we had adopted the budget figuring that we would have a net change in the fund balance of a negative 1.5 million. We should come in at roughly 625,000 negative, which is a lot better. So $900,000 to the good. the big changes for what staff is recommending for the 2025 budget. Of course, with the revenue change in the SAFER grant, that's a big piece of it. The only changes we're recommending are in that intergovernmental category. So we got a second police cadet grant, $50,000, but that has a direct office offset in expenditures of $50,000. So it's a net of zero. The police state aid will be at roughly $150,000 more. That one we get to keep. The fire aid is about $87,000 more, but that one is again a direct, there's an expenditure that goes right back to the relief so far at 100%. So that one has a net effect of zero. With the SAFER grant coming in this first year, we should see in 2025, 1.5 million in revenues. What staff is recommending is that initially we had budgeted for 6 of those 15 firefighters. That's what we included in our levy in the proposed. Staff is recommending, and we ran the scenarios by the finance committee, that we don't change the levy. We hold on to that $600,000 that we had originally levied and build it into our fund balance and do the same thing for the next 2 years, because when that clip comes in 2020 and the SAFER grant is gone, we'll have roughly 1.8 million that we won't have a huge jump in our levy.
Yeah, that was my big question about how the SAFER grant was going to play.
So that's, and because there are some some gear and equipment costs that the city's going to be on the hook for, it's roughly $140,000. Granted, I mean, that's a big chunk in this first year for all 15 firefighters, or which ones maybe aren't already geared up. But then, it'll be another 5 years before we have to re-outfit them, so there's going to be some ebbs and flows for the gear of the firefighters. But this first year, we will have to take that hit because the SAFER grant only covers salary and benefits.
If we hold on to that and it's not being used on firefighters, how is that accounted for so it doesn't look like we're overfunding our fund ratio? Because it looks like, at least on
It'll be a
51%. Was that?
Yeah. Our fund balance ratio, we have to back out or not count the designated fund balances, and that our fund balance ratio doesn't include those.
So it become a designated fund.
Yes. So we won't get it won't look overly fat, but it'll be definitely set aside and very clear when we're talking with Moody's. We're purposefully building toward that 2028 year when the city will be on the hook for the whole cost of those firefighters.
Does that work similarly for unfilled positions? Let's say somebody leaves their position in October and takes 3 months to hire, so you have 3 months of money at the end of the year that you didn't use on that position but is available. Does that same thing happen, or is that?
We get the funding for 15 firefighters. Is it the firefighters?
No, I'm asking just in general. I get the firefighter thing. I agree with it 100%. I think that's a great way to fund it. But is the same thing happening with other positions?
Not necessarily. I mean, what happens is if we have transitions and there's savings realized, if we didn't pay out their PTO balance, which was huge when the director or whoever retired, if there's savings that we realize, generally it just floats to the general fund balance. We don't typically designate that for anything, it just helps save costs going into the next year for what we need to levy.
All right. That explains.
So estimating the fund balance for 2025, we should come in fund balance of the current year expenditures at the end of 2025 at roughly 50%. Again, that's not counting the 600,000 that we would set aside or designate for the fire positions. So when we were looking at our total levy, we've got the increase of the park referendum that added $1 million on for our levy this year. There were some other smaller increases with the park improvement fund, the technology fund, and all that. But when we look at our overall tax capacity rate, we went up roughly 2.4%. So with the growth of the tax base, our tax rate only went up 2.4%, even though the levy was 12% increase. We're still the lowest in Dakota counties, and that's why I included that tax capacity rate. We're still 3% lower than the next city up, which is Rosemont. So, and I'll have that slide in the Truth and Taxation meeting on Monday night, because I think it tells a good story. Lakeville is still a really good choice for people to live and work. The impact on the median home value is, so the median home values changed slightly. The valuations that the county gave us back in August, they changed a bit. So our median home value actually changed. It was 451,000. Now it's down to 450,800. But that's still what it means for a property tax increase for their city portion is $110 a year. So under $10 a month. And commercial properties, they're going to see, and if they were seeing a 10% increase in their valuations for those $1 million valuations with a 10% increase, they will have an annual increase of $1,143.
Do you know how much that is now like caught up to where we were pre-COVID? Because that's such a stark drop. Is it back to similar valuation levels or?
It's hard to tell individually because we only see the aggregate
Okay.
numbers. And like, here's all your commercial property. I can send you what I have for the historical of here's what our mix of different commercial or, you know, commercial, residential apartments, all that. We track that every year, but it could ebb and flow for different areas too.
Curious.
And I do apologize for the graph that has the preliminary 9.3 numbers and the proposed 11.25 at the very bottom, that Adjourn commercial property. Those are last year's values, the $840 and the $762. They're both roughly $1,144 this time. So that was the impact on the median home value in the commercial side. As we are looking at going and building out for what our levy is going to look going forward, we still have some big increases, you know, and we'll keep evaluating that. But the biggest ones, equipment fund is going to go up 1.8 million in 2026. We had not had to levy for the equipment fund because we had those that state aid, not state aid, it was a fire or safety aid, public safety aid. We were able to put some of that into the equipment fund. That helped float us for 2 years here. So, and as far as long-term projections, we're still looking at, even when we're building in the model that took into account all of the projects and all the equipment purchases in the CIP, we're still looking at keeping our tax capacity rate at roughly the 32%, up to 37% is the peak in these next 5 years that we're showing in the model. So still well within, you know, what our comparative neighbors are charging or have for their tax rates. And I think it's in a comfortable level. It's not the highest, but it is, as we're reaching our growth peaks here, that this is the tough years. 25, 26, 27 are the tough years. When you're looking at the general fund budget and those big increases, when you look at the general fund summary, which is that big spreadsheet in the middle of the packet, just looking at public safety, you know, we're up 3.7 million in costs from last year. A lot of that, yes, is the Safer Grant firefighters. So part of that part of it's offset with the revenue up above by 1.5 million, but still a big cost. And I included again this is what you saw, the property tax capacity, this chart here that lists out. This is from the long-term model that Northland helped us update this year. So that's building in all these growth assumptions and staffing increase. Those kind of things are built into this model. The debt service funds are all built on what we've got currently in the CIP. And that's where you'll see those tax capacity rates and how it fluctuates at the very bottom of that page. So in 2025, tax capacity rate roughly 32.69, gets up to 37% in 2027. If we do those things that are so far scheduled in the CIP for those years, because that's the big driver in that year is a lot of CIP capital expenditures. It included, again, the homestead market value exclusion because interestingly enough, the median home value for Lakeville is right at the cusp of what changed for the market value exclusion. It was at 413,000. So a lot of homes were already past this exclusion. They weren't seeing that credit on their tax bill. And now they're seeing a credit on their tax bill. It's like, what? What's this $7,000 credit on it? Like, I've had a couple calls, people saying, and I said, well, it was your lucky day. You reduced it, got your taxable market value down. So it's affecting a lot of homeowners, and it affected our tax base too, because the credit lowering their taxable market value.
But Julie, on that, doesn't it just shift? I mean, we still collect the same amount of money,
Yes,
so it just shifts it to properties that don't receive the credit.
right.
Basically, what
It-
it is.
yeah,
If the state's not giving us a check for that.
No.
So, I mean, it just shifts it.
Yeah, so if you're above it or you're commercial, you're.
You're paying for it. Yeah, exactly. So then I included the updated equipment plan, the tech plan, and facility plan, those showing you, what we've got out there in the CIP, those drivers of those levy increases. You've seen these when we presented the CIP in October, so nothing too extraordinary there. I wondered if you had any questions on any of that. Or anything the way we've got it laid out, anything you'd like changed before Monday night and how we present it.
Do we know how many, what percentage of our housing the homestead market value exclusion increase impacts? I mean, what percentage of the houses in Lakeville get that?
I don't get that information from Dakota
Right.
County. I got it from Scott County.
We've asked for it before, it's been a couple of years, so it wouldn't be very fresh.
Is it, do you have an idea of is it
I'll see.
10%, 55? It's for ballpark.
I think it's quite a few because it's.
Yeah.
it
Well, what's
seems
our
like-
median is what again for?
Our median's below that, so it's at least half of the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it impacted me significantly this time.
The only other thing is, and I don't know if we're getting ourselves in too much of a conundrum, but it would be interesting to see, at the median price, if you plot that home in Farmington or Burnsville or Apple Valley, what the city portion of the taxes would be compared to ours. And instead of talking about as tax capacity.
Oh, talk about what it would be.
Yeah, real dollars.
Yeah, I can definitely add that. I can add that as a
Okay.
separate, here's what the city of Lakeville's, or what Rosemount's tax. Yeah, exactly what you said.
Yeah, well, I just decided someone said it to me.
Yeah, right.
Then if his math is right, we're in pretty good position to our neighbors.
Right. I can easily do that if it gets a formula that goes in for that median home.
I agree with you, Luke. Having a dollar amount is more,
Just easier to explain.
yeah.
You might be able to, on that same chart, you show the rate,
Yeah.
just on those same cities, put a column on the right side with a different color and say, show the property tax on the median home is.
And not their median home, right, but what
Ours, yeah,
450.
because right, you can,
Yeah,
Their
no,
median home is probably different than ours.
they're all different. Yeah, I will add that to that same chart. It may get a little busy, but I can explain it. So,
Okay.
On pages 2 and 3, I'm seeing two different unbalanced percentages. One is at 51 point something and the other is at 50.
yeah, on page 3 is the 2025 expected monthly balance.
So what it would be at
The
the
one-
end of
At
2025
the end of 2025,
versus, yep, on page 2, it's what we would
At the
start.
end of 20.
that could be, it could be just not grabbing the right formulas. I know what it is, because at the end of 2024, we know what 2025's expenditures are. It could be just a timing issue too, or what we put into that committed or designated fund balance. That could be shifting it just that, I mean, the 600,000 alone designated for firefighters could be shifting it between those two. I'd have to look at that.
Because I mean, that would be, what, $900,000, 6%. Brought that back,
Yeah, because every 1% is like 480.
Yeah, so I guess my question is,
Mhm.
if it is at 51.6, are we bringing that down to 50 per policy so that the tax levy is decreased by 800K?
We're not recommending, it's okay for us to be above our fund balance. I mean, we were way above it when COVID and all that extra money came in. And it wasn't a large flight for Moody's because, you know, we had a plan of how we're going to spend that money. We weren't going to like just sit on this big pot of money and shortchange our residents by not decreasing the tax levy. This isn't that much over. Is that what you're asking? Is this a
Yeah.
bit of a red flag as far as?
Well, I mean, I doubt that percentage is a red flag, but it seems if it's out of, above the policy, then we should decrease the levy by.
But then I'll have to check that because the 2024 year end would not have our $600,000 designated fund balance because we wouldn't get the money until 2025.
Sure.
So that
Yeah.
kind of affects.
Well, and if it's closer to the second number that I'm saying, 50.2, I'm not concerned.
And that's where I think we need to keep the focus is actually, we know all these expenditures that are coming in 2025 that we need to prepare for. And that's, if we're lucky enough, and again, you know, we've budgeted the permits at 300,000, you know, if we have another slow year like this one, if the economy doesn't rebound in that aspect, we could be shortchanging ourselves revenue wise. And there's a risk we take if we do that. So I don't think we need, by decreasing the levy or even talking about decreasing the levy to stay within that fund balance, we're really cutting it short for potential if the market doesn't rebound for the permits and the other.
But wouldn't you just designate some of the excess fund balance and designate for the next year? I mean, instead of decreasing the.
We can do that too. Yeah. I mean, we can just designate so we stay at the 50%, stay at the 50% too. And designating it as a contingency for if other revenues come in short.
Well, I think my mind goes to on an already high year. If there are ways to bring that levy down and we're over policy, that unless there's a better use of those funds, why would we not decrease the levy?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what the right number is. So just to reaffirm, our policy is 40 to 50, right?
Yeah. And again, I mean, by designating that, if we were to designate some of the 2024 balance, just so it didn't look bad, I don't know, for lack of a better word, it still gives us the opportunity, council, with any designated fund balance, council has authority to say how we should spend that money. And again, if we get something come up that we hadn't planned on, you know, that it's an easy to do by getting council approval on paying for something like that.
I think that's what the other 10% of that fund balance is for, because that's our range, right? 40 to 50%.
But we're wanting to be comfortable. Everybody's like, oh, what happens when we drop below 50%? Well, it's okay because our range is actually 40 to 50. So, and I see your point. I mean, the appearance of it at the end of 2024 could be misleading or, but again, we've got a lot of big costs that are, I mean, just with the general fund, the way we've got the 2025 budget structured with conservative building permit revenue, we're going to just come in again at just right at the 50% mark. So
Oh, that's okay to me.
it's okay. Yeah, it's okay, I think. But if you want, depends how you want the story and the narrative to be given. I think we're trying to be fiscally responsible, but also not cutting ourselves too short. And I get it. We've got a whole another 10% to go, but we don't want to lose our AAA rating either. So we don't want to have this huge drop in that fund balance.
I mean, the designation is intriguing. I mean, a couple of the pitfalls there are, you don't want to turn that into a surplus. And it's just knowing, I mean, looking at this budget and looking at the next 3 years, I don't think there's going to be any lack of places to, use that money to help bring the levy down.
Yeah.
If we did designate, if we were over 50% and designated it, I think we want to just keep a close look on it, because once again, we just don't want that to turn into a surplus where we're just holding on to money. But I just have a feeling with the way things are looking the next few years, if we did have to designate to get to 50%, I think that'd be a good strategy, because I'm sure there's something we'll use it on.
We could easily, if we do come out ahead at the end, truly come out ahead at 2024, we could designate easily those monies that we're planning to levy for the equipment fund or those ongoing maintenance levies. We could say, yeah, let's designate 500,000 of the general fund excess for the equipment levy, and we won't need to then levy in 2026 for as much. We can reduce it by 600,000.
That seems like a pretty wide scope.
The way this is, the numbers here, is that, I know we had taken some from what we intended to put into the equipment fund, I believe. Is that reinstating that contribution to the equipment fund yet?
It's not, because we plan to use liquor funds. We increased the liquor contributions to bring down the September preliminary. So, and the liquor fund the fund balance on the liquor is very healthy, and we can do that definitely for this year and not put it into a bad position. So we bumped up that liquor contribution.
It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but it just, if we can make ourselves kind of whole with our philosophy again of these, this tax levy is intended to put monies here, here, and here in these different funds. It makes most sense to do that. And where the liquor fund needs to be appropriated later, maybe makes more sense in my mind. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter to others, but I'm just trying to.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, no,
I
I
understand what you're saying too, and normally I'd be like right there with you saying, okay, let's decrease this one. But then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, look at the numbers for the next couple of years. And if we can figure out a way to kind of offset the next one so it's not as big as this one, does that make sense? Trying to kind of plan ahead a little bit instead of just getting by in the checkbook this year to worry about the checkbook next year.
That's where I'm at.
And we could even do, for not just December 2nd meeting, but December 16th meeting, when we will have budget amendments. We could do a budget amendment to have a certain dollar amount transfer out of the general fund to one of those other capital funds, knowing that then we could reduce the 26 levy that we would have to have for those. So we can easily do that as part of it, and it's being done before the end of the year. So it's,
Well, and I know we had certain goals for certain funds, and so we can help put ourselves to where we wanted that fund to be, that we dug into, to make sure that our levy was below a certain percentage. Then I'm certainly on board with that. And then to me, is a good use of funds. I can rationalize that to taxpayers who are listening to this conversation and wondering, well, if there's an excess, why don't we just put that back in my pocket?
Cause I was gonna take it out of your pocket and more next year.
Yeah.
So if I can take less from you next year. It's like you they're putting a little bit of money in our savings account for it to offset expenses that are coming up again.
You know how much people love the government to say.
Oh, I do, I know. I mean, I love that song.
Other questions? I would say, thanks to your team on tightening up the levy percentage from where we're in September. Makes it a little bit easier to deal with, so thank you for that. So the final 9.6 or is it 9.3?
That's general fund. It's still 12% overall. The total levy is still the 12%.
Right.
But the general fund in part of that is the 9.6.
Yeah.
8% for the general fund. And the park referendum is 2.4%. And then the other mix of the other trail improvement, all that other stuff makes up roughly 1%. And I would have that information too at the December 2nd, truth and taxation, so makeup of the levy, those increases is one of the slides. And then,
I'd like to get out of double digit increase on here pretty soon.
I'm sorry, what, Michelle?
I'd like to get out of the double digit increase this year pretty soon, so hopefully we can get there by next year or
But we won't have the park debt or the park referendum bump next year because we've issued all that debt.
right.
Well, to that point, if the franchise fee discussion does not go through, and just for the sake of knowing how the impact of that is on tax levy, when would that be assessed on the tax levy?
2026, we'd have to start, we'd have to include in our levy for the bonds that we're issuing for the first center here in March 2025.
So a year from now.
It'd be in the 26 levy.
Mhm.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, I have 10 minutes, I think, to do the quarterly, right, Jeff?
Or as much time as you need.
We were hoping for better numbers in the building permit area, but I'm crossing my fingers and I'm telling Dave Matthews he's got to pump pavement more. Because right now, as of November 19th, we're at 252 single families and 300 was a conservative budget.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how,
Yeah.
I don't know how we are in the rest of the year, but from the conversations anecdotally that I've had with builders since the first of the month, they're very optimistic about 20.
They are not.
They are.
We have a lot in the pipeline. I mean, you've approved some plats. There's some others that have been digging, building streets and utilities, so there's stuff trying to go.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
Ritter stuff is gonna come.
we have a couple commercial and industrial, some projects that are likely to break ground too.
Incredible how it's just shaping up, just roads and lights over.
Yeah, he said that they're gonna have some Ritter sales by summer or something. Like very quickly.
It all depends when those building permits get issued.
Yeah,
And then
right.
in which
Yeah.
year we get to recognize the revenue in, so that's a big driver. Everything else is pretty much in line. General fund revenues are 74% of the budget, so, for third quarter, that's right in the mark. Personnel expenditures are at 75% of budget, which is, again, right where we want them to be for third quarter. So there wasn't anything really too much that jumped out at us. We had a formula error that we caught something like, oh, yes, that's much a better number. So it was pretty funny because there's an accrual that Juliet Werner has to build in these accruals. And she added one extra zero in the police, so it was like 3 million instead of 300,000. I'm like, wait a second, that's way over budget. So anyway.
Yeah, Russell.
School districts. So.
Yeah.
Gives me a little difference.
On the Parks and Rec revenue,
Yes.
do we know, is it driven from rental at Antlers, driven from classes at Fine Arts Building, or?
I think it's Antlers that we weren't planning. I mean, there's definitely some money that came in there that hadn't, words not have been part of the budget. But they also had a lot of more program revenue too, so,
I'd say it's both those.
Mix of those.
Yeah.
yeah,
So the investments are,
yep, payment, yep. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes. I mean, the ERP costs that was a big driver, at least for finance budget, for 2024. That's gonna fall off in 2025, just down to ongoing maintenance. So general fund is, and like I said, it's looking good. We'll end the year at a good percentage and hopefully be able to have solid enough numbers to bring to that December 16th meeting some budget amendments that could include a transfer out to help reduce those 2026 levies. Water fund, let's just skip to that one. Everything else with communication, it's going like we thought it would, with revenues continuing to decrease slightly. The fund balance in the communication fund is okay. We don't have to be concerned right now with that one. Liquor fund, again, sales have been pretty light, but they're holding it. They're holding their own. The gross profit margin is better than it was a year ago, by 1%. So they're doing fine. they're not sinking.
Well, it's hard to just like year after year after year.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah,
Keep having increases, so,
It'll be a big next month, this weekend.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know my wine cellar's empty, so I need to go shopping. The water fund, as you probably remember our conversation, with the wet year, it's really affected the revenues in the water fund. We did increase rates by 3% in 2024, and with the 2025 budget, we've increased it to a 6%, I believe it was. That's helping to make up for the wet year. Hoping to, again, to do our pay-as-you-go, so when it's time in 2027 for the water treatment plant, that we're not having to issue any bonds, but we may have to issue 5 million of bonds, even with the rate increases. But operating expenditures for water fund are under budget at 61%. So again, part of that though is projects and where all the timing of those expenditures come in. So and MCES, their fees increased 6.8% in 2024. So that's a big chunk of money. So we pay them roughly $5.5 million for them to process the water, or the sewer, I should say. Street lighting, it's doing fine. They're exceeding the budget for revenues. And again, that has to do with growth, basically, because we didn't increase those rates at all. Environmental Resource Fund, we did not increase those rates either, and those revenues are slightly higher too. Again, I think that's having to do with the growth in the city. So anything, questions on the third quarter report, anything that you saw, any numbers that were alarming?
Are you realizing the efficiencies of the new system?
We just had that discussion today. Not yet. We're, it's still taking a lot of time. We thought we'd see a lot of time savings, at least in finance with the AP, because how it's dispersed and departments are entering their own information, and then finance is the gatekeeper. We check coding and everything and then move them through the system. we've had a lot of time put in. We were not realizing the time savings yet. And nobody in the city is. But there's a learning curve associated with it too. So we're hopeful and that it will get there. It's just been a lot. And you probably see some overtime in the finance department here. I know you will actually, trying to get utility billing.
I think more on the individual level, I think people are finding the efficiencies with it, especially with the reporting part of it. Julie went over some stuff with me earlier last week, and to crank out a report on your budget is super easy compared to what I used to. Well, we never could do it before individually.
Right.
So I think there will be definitely some great benefits of it once we get it all figured out.
And what's really, really nice about it is it's live. So, if you get shown or you get the reports built to like, okay, oh yeah, and I need to see everything, even that's maybe encumbered with a purchase order. There's a way to get to see that information. So it's very helpful for those people that have got those big budgets that they're trying to say, okay, what have I got left out of all these projects that are going on? So it's really nice and really nice to have the purchase orders tracking a project at the project level. So, because there's a lot of spreadsheets that we do all that with right now. So, not that the spreadsheets are going to go away completely until we have full faith and are comfortable with how it all goes in the system. But I mean, we're excited and we're still excited. It's just, it's a lot.
Has the vendor been responsive in terms of, oh, hey, we need this, or how do we do this? Or
They've been very responsive. We had to, with the implementation itself, there were set up things that they were problematic, that we didn't get a lot of training when they thought we should have been getting training. So they comped us some training time. We just had to pay their airfare for some in-person time, that extra time that we got with them. And Lakeville is we're special because we have the other two entities that we're the fiscal agent for. So that creates a whole nother dynamic about the bank accounts and how we had to do before we transferred funds, and we're trying to get away from that. But by getting away from that and having separate checking accounts for all three entities creates some challenges that they haven't had to have with other clients. So we've got three federal ID numbers that we process payrolls for, so it's definitely had its challenges. We're making them work. I guess is the best way to put it, and having to think through what is the best way to set this up, because it's not something they've encountered before, actually, one entity having to do all this different, these financial groups.
Trust me, we're in a much better place than if we had stayed with Logis.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've been hearing,
Amen.
They're in a world.
it's not.
And we do, a lot of the cities are neighbor cities that are with Logis. They're like getting BSNA demos, and actually our sales rep was just down in Farmington last week. So they stopped by here, went through the special assessment module demo with us. So it's exciting. It really is, because going from 3 or 4 different softwares down to 1 or maybe 2, because we got cartograph, but it's just having it all in one place is really nice. So again, it's a learning curve though, because it's rest.
Yeah.
More questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Both. Moving on to items for future discussion. The committee city administrator updates.
had the Dakota 9/11 board of directors meeting last week. That went pretty well. It's interesting because they are very pleased with how we're able to deliver with the new ERP. There's some adjustments and learning curve. But talked about some technology stuff. There's an audio beta, so it's how you record what's going on. And back in the day, it used to be 2 big reels with magnetic tape. Well, it's not bad anymore. So just approved a contract for that, but it's going to have some really cool capabilities in terms of just analysis and calls. I mean, it sounds like they'll even be able to do like voice stress, tone analysis and things like that. And so really, really cool. So that's in the process of taking bids and approving them and getting that going. And then under cybersecurity, I mean, I think it's timely to have it in our thing because they're gonna, Dakota 911 is gonna sign on with some cybersecurity services. It just built a firewall, tries to analyze what threats are on. Because the problem with it, I think the reason that, we want to make that a priority too, is it's not just building the wall, it's understanding how quickly and rapidly that changes and, keeping up with it. So I think that's a timely piece. And then, otherwise it was pretty straightforward meeting.
Are they still doing well on staffing and?
Better. As a matter of fact, the staffing's good. The thing about public safety and the 24/7 thing is there's always somebody out with something.
Yeah.
And, so even if you have regular staffing, I'm trying to get to the director's report.
I mean, I knew for years that they were short, and then I think 2
They-
years ago, they finally caught up with enough
They
hired,
aren't,
and I just didn't know where they were at.
they aren't as short as they were in one program they started to help with that is taking part-time. So very kind of stringent on what they do, but taking retired dispatchers, experienced dispatchers, particularly Dakota 911 ones. So they retire, but they can come back and work. And that's been very helpful in filling gaps for short term. And then the hiring, there were only, I think it was like 3 people under what the maximum is authorized. So yes, they were doing really well with staffing and all that.
And how do you like the new director?
One of the things that we addressed was that we just received her performance evaluation. She is really, really doing well.
Okay.
She knows her stuff. The thing I can tell you is this lady knows when she knows the business. She knows what they need at Dakota 911. She knows the language. She knows the people. So that's been very good. Very much on top of things. I trust what she's doing explicitly, and she's done very well, and her performance evaluation reflected that.
Good.
Yeah.
There is conversation at the ALF meetings about how calls are being coded. Not that that has anything to do with her performance. Sorry, I didn't make it seem like that was connected. But it made me think about ALF in our recent meeting, which last week we approved a change to how paramedics are being scheduled because paramedics are in short supply. And so instead of requiring 2 paramedics on everybody, there's now a paramedic and potentially an EMT in place of that second paramedic, which with the pilot that happened over the summer, there was no change in care or quality. But I think there's ongoing conversations about what they're responding to and how those calls are being coded through dispatch. And if they need to send a rig to every single one, or if they can code it in a way that a truck, which is not staffed by 2 paramedics, can go to the scene, because many of those calls, particularly at a spot in Apple Valley, are falls that senior falls that someone needs to just help them back up. There's not even an injury. It's just can't get up. So that's part of the update that I had for ALF. But
Sounds like Apple Valley needs a duty crew in the fire department.
And it's interesting because a lot of those designations are just automatic based on the software. You start asking questions, if it does this, it says send this. So it's that's an interesting piece of that. And that's been a conversation for, oh my goodness, 15 years. Seriously, it's so eventually it'll hopefully get worked out, but a lot of that is they just don't have the ability to say, well, no, just send this. But people can, their piece is people can cancel each other as they're. doing it.
35W Solutions, we had a, I'll say an unprompted discussion about or an unscheduled discussion about kind of the future of the organization. There's a plan being pushed by some to hire a consultant to reevaluate regional projects that should be on the priority list. Commissioner Holberg, I think appropriately gave some pushback there, saying we've got everything, literally everything in the policy, in the objectives of that organization done except for Lakeville and Elko New Market, the further south areas. And the discussion then kind of went to, let's get those done before we start looking at, Cedar Avenue or other things. And then that prompted an interesting comments by people saying, well, maybe if we get this all done, we could just dissolve this organization. So it was really kind of an interesting, it did bring out the diversity of that coalition. People from Richfield weren't quite so sure that Elko New Market should be high on the priority list. And so kind of went into some of that. But anyway, we're still evaluating whether to hire a consultant to tell us all of this. $5,000 a consultant, which to me just didn't seem like a consult. But there has been a gap in convening that technical advisory committee there too, just because we know what the objectives of that coalition have been, and we've known them for a long time. So I know Zach was going to take a leadership role. So interesting. It was one of the hotter meetings we've had there.
It's really unfair that we make everybody go to Richfield.
I don't know. But you go west, different ways they have to do. So I've asked them a couple times.
Send them to the Iowa border here. They think, Lakeville and Elko's Iowa border. Yeah.
They're excited about their bike bridge over 494. We had quite a bit of discussion about that. Okay, talking about just trying to get traffic up the interstate, but it was an interesting meeting.
Fire relief continues to discuss vesting schedule changes and the viability and impact of change to a defined contribution plan. The second piece is very preliminary at this point, but I asked Justin to include that as a January retreat topic.
Good. The only thing is EDC, we're wrapping up some of the strategic plan stuff, and then there will be some conversation about business retention type programs moving forward. Some of those type of things. So
That's good.
Regional Council of Mayors, we had another conversation about housing. We'll see how that plays out.
And we had our exciting Metro Cities policy adoption meeting with our 2 votes for the first time.
Wow.
Who was the second vote?
Well, it's all by acclamation anyway, so. That was a moment of pride when they announced the cities that got 2 votes, so.
Did someone lose their vote?
I don't think
No,
so.
it's just 75,000 people. You get 2 votes.
Oh, sweet.
So if the population goes down.
So you voted twice, is what you're saying.
Well, that was my question the last time. You know, they said Maple Grove. You know, they say Maple Grove has 2 votes, and I'm looking like population. Like, oh, they have 2 votes. We were a little under 75,000 at that point, so.
The last one I would say is that thanks for submitting your city administrator evaluations. We'll be in
Yeah.
closed session after next week's meeting.
We're all accommodating Dan.
Since he's got-
What? Next week in December already? No.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
Thanksgiving's Thursday.
This is a very late Thanksgiving, that's why it's.
Yes, it is.
Really, we're moving that all up just for me, huh? I can zoom in.
No, I'm teasing you. Actually,
We can't go into closed session with you on.
You can't?
No.
no.
Why not? So we have
There could be somebody in the room, with you,
Legal.
right? Is that why?
Probably.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I can
technically,
just text in my
yeah,
thoughts.
there's a set, yeah. Just
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, we're accommodating, good, I appreciate you all. Am I the only one who's gonna be gone at that?
Yeah, I think you are.
So that
Aloha.
there's no quorum.
I think, oh, that's true.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Did you get the invite for the-
I did.
I forwarded.
That's this one. December 12th. Oh, it's too this way. It's too late.
Nice.
So
So I'm sure I will do very.
I wasn't getting my
Yeah, no.
I just had my, password, like, or whatever. but-
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I gotta